Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's meeting. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reportings include filming, photography, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting your personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphones when speaking, please. Thank you. Agenda item 1, appointment of substitutes.
Chair, we've got no substitutes with us this evening.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, declaration of interest. Do we have any? None recorded. Public participation. Wow. Thank you. And we'll move on to the minutes. Agenda item 4. If you can go page by page. Page 1. Page 2. And page 3. All accurate as recorded then, please, Julian. Thank you. Agenda item 5, freedom leisure. I'll hand over to Alan.
Thank you, Chair. We've got Rob Tyler here from Freedom Leisure this evening, who's their area manager, who is going to take us through a presentation in a few moments. But I just wanted to kind of open up really with a bit of an introduction in terms of saying that from the point of view of the pandemic, which has then been followed by the impact of the energy crisis and the cost of living crisis, we're probably really in unprecedented times. Certainly as a city council officer with more years service than I kind of want to remember almost, I personally managed the leisure centres for a period of about 20 years prior to us appointing a leisure operator. And in all that period, we never had anything like what the leisure industry has faced in the last kind of couple, 2 or 3 years. So it is unprecedented times. But this evening's report is the performance report for 21-22. So there obviously were some elements of the energy crisis and the cost of living crisis starting during that period, and they've clearly escalated quite rapidly since then over the summer. But the energy crisis, we will bring a paper to committee in January. We're doing a piece of work at the moment with a company to bring a paper back to look at specifically at the impact of the energy kind of crisis moving forward and what that looks like from both Freedom Leisure and the council's point of view. So really the kind of purpose of tonight's presentation is to look at that performance review period from April 21 to March 22. So without any more ado, I'll kind of hand over to Rob. Thank you.
Look at this. Can you hear me? Yeah, great. Thanks, Alan. So, bear with. Okay. Perfect. Which one? The top? Yeah, I've got the clicker. Yeah. That's fine. Yeah. Oh, here we go. Perfect. Okay, so yeah, evening everybody. Hope everybody's well. We're here today to review the annual performance for last year, April 21 to March 22, covering the contract and the centres at Purdaswell, Nunnery Wood, St John's, our active communities team, and tennis at Cripplegate and Gulliver Park. In terms of reviewing the year in reflection, you're probably going to struggle to see all of the points on there. Despite the challenges last year, there were many successes. I think for me, one of the standouts was our Learn to Swim programme. We ended the year with 2,544 swim members, so that's children and adult learning to swim. And looking back at the start of the contract, we began on 650. So, we've had a fantastic year for our swim school programme. The customer satisfaction scores that we carried out throughout the year were above the national average and group average. We saw utility reductions of 32% on gas and combined energy reduction of 26% between gas and electricity throughout the contract, which obviously puts us in a better position in these current times. Our audit scores all were above the benchmarks. We delivered successful open days within the centres and out in the communities, delivering free multi-sports programmes and so on. There were successful marketing campaigns. We delivered the free multi-sports and inclusive programmes. Sure what that is. We saw a 27% increase in walk-in sports compared to 2019-20. And we appointed a group sustainability and environmental manager to the group. There were some weaknesses, some challenges, recruitment being one of them, membership base not returning to pre-COVID levels, which is a common theme across the industry. We recovered to 86% of our membership base following the impact of the pandemic. In terms of opportunities, there's quite a few there. So we've already started to look at health partner referral programs. We see that as a great opportunity for us moving forward. We've just rolled out recently within the last week a program called Good Boost, which we'll report on within the next quarterly report, which really focuses on members of the public suffering with MSK conditions. So it's a fantastic scheme. I don't want to go too much into detail now, but it's a 9-month pilot for us where we can really engage with different user groups and bring them into the centre. We've launched within the last few months, and we will continue to do that to mitigate against the cost of living crisis, new loyalty reward schemes within our membership base. So if you're a member of Freedom Leisure, whether that be swim school or a full fitness member, you will benefit from a wide range of loyalty rewards and discounts in terms of other facilities and programs that you could take part in. So we're just trying to add more value to the memberships. There's opportunities in terms of the half-funded holiday camps for the next half term. So really trying to get children with the highest needs into the centre. So that's a focus point for us. Expanding the women and girls programmes that we've already got underway. Specifically, we've recently launched the ladies only swim on a Sunday evening, and we're getting some really good numbers into those programmes, which is absolutely great to see, which just shows that there's more opportunities out there for us. So that's an area that we're keen to push. And supporting Ukrainian refugees, we've supported with a 3-month free membership, and we had I think over 100 or so that have taken out the option, so which is fantastic. So there could be further support there. And to continue to support community events throughout the city, promoting our services and providing free multi-sports where possible. As Alan said, there are significant threats at the moment across the whole country, to be perfectly honest, and the leisure industry is really under some pressure at the moment from a utility point of view. We operate some large facilities with plant rooms and swimming pools. We are affected, unfortunately. There's obviously a cost of living crisis, Inflation's at a 40-year high. We had the pool closure in the summer for 12 weeks, and I originally put that on there as a threat, but the good news is we've recovered all of the members in the Learn to Swim programme, and we've recovered all of the members that we initially lost at the start of the closure. And that just shows the strength in partnership that we've got with the council and the good work that we put in throughout that closure period to continue to operate our swim school at other city venues. And there's other threats in terms of the supply chain, and we've had pool chemical shortages for the last 12 months. So all in all, yeah, it's a difficult time, but there's still lots of positives within there. The financial performance last year, we finished with a deficit of £85,000, which included a management fee to the council of just under £320,000. The position included some grants, as you can see there. Active participation, 567,000 active participants throughout the year. However, if you can see there, the impact following the pandemic is clear. We haven't fully recovered in terms of our participation rates within the centres. So we're seeing a deficit of 31% compared to 2019 at Perth as well. St John's of 33% and Nunnery Wood at 15%. You know, the figures are looking a lot better than that at this present time. Year on year, we've seen some really good growth compared to last year. So hopefully that will continue. So I've gone through this one already, but just to summarise, the programme, the swim school programme, has grown by 459 members since the pre-pandemic, and it grew by 351 during last year. We ended with 2,544 members at the end of March earlier this year. We deliver 311 classes a week, and our current occupancy is 93%. And we've also got 20 schools engaged in weekly swimming lessons. So swim school is definitely a plus point of ours at this present moment in time. And I'm pleased to say the numbers are where they were at the end of Q4, considering we've obviously had the closure for 12 weeks. Active communities, so very much our active communities team are responsible for getting out into the community, providing free sports and activities or low cost activities to those areas where it is desperately needed. We saw participation rates of just over 9,000. There was 1,582 who took part in free school multi-sports, which was delivered at 14 city venues. 1,574 for walking sports, tennis, netball and football. 3,246 in youth sport, where we supported within the 6 community hubs. And we delivered school sports in five schools. And a little bit more on active communities. We delivered disability sport, football, seated games, inclusive swimming, where we saw just over 16,000 participants. We supported community events within the city, Worcester Show, Ronkswood Family Fun Day, the Tolladine Family Fun Day, a play day at Gullivout Park, Festival of Water, Southco Fun Day, and we're going to hopefully continue to do more of that as throughout the year. Energy actions. So within the contract, we've continued to reduce our energy consumption, and some of the actions include the installation of the pool cover at Perth as well, reduction of pool temperatures. We've upgraded our lighting to LED at all of the facilities in the area. We've got energy non-negotiables in place. We've reduced low occupancy classes and we've appointed a group environmental and sustainability manager. Okay, so you can see the year-on-year improvements here. So I'll just pick out a couple of the key points. There were some faults within the CHP at Perth as well. However, we saw a reduction of 51,000 kilowatts last year when compared to 2018 for electricity. At St John's on the bottom graph, we've seen continuous improvements for 3 consecutive years for our electricity reduction. We showed a 33% reduction on electricity last year when compared to 2018 and 19. Nunnery Wood, we saw a reduction of 12% between 2021 and 2018's usage. Across the contract, during last year, we saved 139,000 kilowatts of electricity compared to our pre-COVID year. And during last year, we saved 190,000 kilowatts of gas compared to the pre-COVID year. In terms of our targets that we set, you can see there, I'll pick out a couple of the highlights, which we know on Swim School, we wanted to be back at 100% pre-COVID by the end of March. We overachieved at 122%. We wanted to reduce our energy consumption by 5%. We achieved a combined 26%. The disappointing one was membership recovery. We wanted to be at 100% by March 2022, and we achieved 86%, and we're around about the 91% mark at this moment in time. Here are targets for the year ahead. The key one in the middle is to ensure business survival for the organisation, to ensure that we deliver for our customers and achieve high audit scores on our customer feedback, to continue to deliver the health partner referral schemes, to continue to grow our Learn to Swim programme up to 2,650 by the end of this year, to achieve 100% membership recovery by March, absolutely determined to get there, to see a 10% year-on-year increase in active participation. Just a few of the highlights and the key areas for us for next year, this year, current year. And yeah, that brings an end to the presentation.
Thanks, Rob, for that comprehensive report. I'll open it out to the floor now. Do we have any speakers? Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's obviously a lot of good work going on with Freedom Leisure. It's providing a lot of activity for a lot of people within the city, and long may it last. There's 3 questions I have in relation to the report you presented. The first is in relation to the first page of our paper, which talks about the problems that you have recruiting. And I'd just like to know about the blocks or whatever it is that's causing that issue. The second one, which is on page 13 of our paper, you've on the RAG red rated the problem of the supply chain and the pool chemicals. Tried to do a little bit of research on that and found out about the company closing down in the States and the problems that's emanating from that. Just want to know how dire that is, as to whether we are going to be able to get the chemicals to run the pool, or whether you're going to have to resort to other methods of keeping the water safe and clean. And then finally, page 21, I was a little bit concerned in relation to the, I'm going to find it now, excuse me, managers audit, no, it's not 21, it's after that, sorry. Managers audit, that's it, page 27. Where it talks about the areas of the audit, and it includes catering, health and safety, and general cleaning. And I see that the target for all those is 85%. But I'm just thinking that in relation to those issues in particular, that should the target not be higher? But if you could please, thank you.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the questions. In terms of the recruitment, why? I think employment is at a low at the moment. We've, in all honesty, across the industry, typically perhaps don't pay fantastic wages. And since the return of COVID, I think everybody's managed to stop and think about what their opportunities look like moving forward. I think the impact of COVID and the national lockdowns put a stop to courses that we would normally operate, such as the lifeguard courses and the swim teacher courses and so on. So it very much is, it's been a bit of a backlog and trying to catch back up. And this is very much an issue, not just within Worcester, but across the whole industry. I've got friends in other companies that are all saying exactly the same thing. Things have settled down a little bit at the moment, which is positive. One of our missions, well, one of our strategic objectives at the start of the year was how we could become employer of choice within the communities that we operate. And we've got a task force underway at the moment trying to promote the benefits of working for us, whether that be through being able to be progressed throughout the company, be given the opportunity to take part in courses, cross-centre work, and so on. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes to really try and put ourselves out there for potential new colleagues, as well as trying to retain existing colleagues. But it has been an issue. Things have started to settle down. In terms of the poor chemical shortages, absolutely a national issue, and has been for quite some time. I have kept Alan, the client officer, updated throughout in terms of the threat. We are, within the Freedom Leisure Group, is seen as one of the flagship sites and are a priority. So I think in terms of if we ever got to that position in the future, we would be prioritised over other facilities, perhaps with smaller pools and less customers and so on. So in terms of the audit, yeah, 100% is where we always strive to be, and that's where we need to be. I think 85% is very much across the board. It's a random audit, but yeah, I take your point, and I think yeah, believe me, it's 100% in terms of my expectations, but the Freedom Leisure benchmark is currently 85, but I'd be disappointed if it was around there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Hodgson and Councillor Sarah next.
I've got two questions. First of all, carrying on from Councillor McKay's questions, do you employ apprentices?
We do, and thankfully we've actually had a couple just start recently, which is brilliant. But that took quite a while to get that through, to be honest with you. Disappointingly, I'll talk about lifeguards at Pearl as well. We've struggled to attract lifeguards. We went out for apprentices, didn't receive any inquiries whatsoever. But we've since gone out for apprentice opportunities at St. John's for a fitness instructor, and we've managed to find somebody. So yeah, absolutely. We've got a couple of success stories. One was a lifeguard going back 12 to 18 months who's just finished his course and is also adding his experience now going through swim teacher qualifications and so on. But yeah, we have tried. I don't think we've got anywhere near as the return as we'd have hoped, to be honest with you. And we all contribute towards the levy, and we haven't reaped the rewards of it so far, in all honesty. But I see that as an absolute opportunity to bring people in and progress them through the organisation.
Through our economic team, maybe to secure a few more as well, maybe. The other thing, I heard on Midlands Today this week that not in this area, but in other parts of the Midlands, companies planning closures because of the energy crisis, and I just wondered whether or not you were planning sort of closures, maybe closing a few hours earlier or something like that.
So it's a separate piece of work in terms of yourselves, Worcester City Council, in terms of the longer term provision of the local leisure centres. But in terms of the Freedom Leisure Group specifically, we have lost 2 pools already as a consequence of the energy impact. Utilities are increasing from 8 million to 20 million, and for a not-for-profit leisure trust that perhaps would make $1 million surplus in a year, it's unsustainable. So to mitigate against that across the group, we've got a restructure which is currently underway, where we're potentially going to lose up to 10% of the workforce. And we've got another range of measures in place. Energy action plans were already in place, but even more so across the organisation at present. And we have looked at things like service provision and programmes, but thankfully in Worcester, we operate some first-class leisure facilities that are very busy, as I've gone through in terms of the presentation earlier today. So we're working with the officers and directors to look at the future really and how we can protect that.
And just one other question. I noticed that are given 3 months free. Ukrainians, I mean, are you going to keep that on, or because obviously they're going to be in this country for many, many months. So are you going to perhaps extend that?
Yeah, I think with everything there, and the residents at the refugees at the moment are starting to come towards the end of that 3-month opportunity that we gave them. So we will absolutely take that away and discuss that with the officers and how we can best support them moving forward, because it's the right thing to do, and we're committed to doing that. So hopefully, haven't directly answered it, but we will go away and look at that.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Tissera.
Thanks, Chair. I sit as an outside body, Worcester Play Council. Are you aware of this group?
Yeah.
So they tell me that in previous years you used to collaborate with them, or Freedom Leisure would collaborate with them, especially on picking up some of the leisure activities for the youth area. So Worcester Play Council are supposed to cover in their charter up to 16, but they only really cover up to 11. And I was wondering whether there was an opportunity for the 2 parties to work together again like they used to. I don't know what plan you might have.
Yeah, sure. Big commitment is within the sports centres for them to come and take part in activity free of charge, so that there is that available to them. And I've recently been in dialogue with Alan to discuss those opportunities. So hopefully we can provide more of an update to the Play Council following the meeting.
Okay, well, I'm not sure that was exactly the question. I was wondering whether you could actually deliberately work with them on a plan and, you know, try to together deliver things for that group that is currently missing out a lot.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to commit to anything right now, but absolutely, I'll take that away and consider that, and we'll come back to you. Grab your name before I go.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers? Councillor Lamb?
Yeah, just to ask my annual question about tennis, free tennis on page 25. So I notice you provided 15 hours of free tennis each week of the year. Is there any plans to increase that figure? I think we've discussed it a few times. And you say our free tennis participation target was achieved, and you've got free of charge participation 690. Be interested to know what the target was. What was the actual target? How much more is 690 over the target? What was the target based on? And is there going to be any plan to increase the target for free tennis participation? I was also interested to this figure here in the table, 33%. Is that an expression of the sort of take up or the utility of the tennis courts in terms of how much they're actually used? And is there any difference between the sort of take up and the use of the tennis courts in Gellivelt and in Cripplegate? Because is it Gellivelt there's probably 2 courts and in Cripplegate there's probably 4 courts. So it'd just be interesting to see what the take up of tennis courts are in both, and also any plans to increase the free tennis opportunities.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I've just realised I didn't actually bring the full report with me, which is frustrating. With some of the questions, I will need to go away and come back to you. But in all honesty, in terms of the free tennis, that part of the bid was 15 hours of free tennis, which we've absolutely delivered. But outside of that, throughout various points last year and even this year, we've gone beyond that 15 hours. So the 2 weeks before the Wimbledon, we provided free courts for 2 solid weeks in partnership with the council, and we spent significant amounts of money in terms of on marketing and staffing resource to try and promote the courts. And very recently in the October half term, beyond the 15 hours of free tennis, we offered specific sessions during the day to attract families. So we've done that very recently. We've also delivered our free multi-sport sessions at the courts, which have seen a fantastic take up. So yeah, we have been doing an awful lot more for free tennis, and we see that as an opportunity to do more moving forwards. Also wanted to add that we didn't increase the fees and charges this year on tennis to hopefully to try and to boost our participation rates. So that was a bit on the free tennis, and I'll come back to you with regards to the other items within tennis, if that's okay. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Cleary.
Thanks, Chairman. It's just a quick one about the point 7 in the financial review, where it relates to St John's Sports Centre and Nunley Wood Sports Centre. In March this year, they were clearly both in quite considerable deficit. And if you've already touched on this at the start, and I didn't get it, I apologise. But I'm just wondering, do you keep sort of rolling figures or 6 monthly figures? So do we know how much deficit these are still in? And if we don't, is there an indication of when they're going to come out of deficit, if they are? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So we provide quarterly performance reports to Alan as the client officer. So Q1 and Q2 are currently out at the moment. Q1 has the financial figures in. Q2 will very shortly. So I'll be sure to make sure we can get a copy over to you, if that's okay. Great.
Thank you. Councillor Pachowski.
Thank you, Chair. thank you very much for your detailed report. I noted the section on energy efficiency measures with particular interest, and it's some really encouraging work happening there. Very simple question: do you know what your carbon footprint is in Worcester? And the follow-up question: would you be happy to get in touch with our small environmental sustainability team to see how the leisure centres can contribute to our net zero targets? Thank you.
Sure, yeah. I don't have the information right to hand now. However, our group sustainability and environmental manager has already been working closely with the council in terms of what we're looking to do in the future and how we're going to improve the current situation. So she's fantastic and gives us a really good opportunity. So yeah, great.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers on the item? No? Oh, so I'll sum up then. I mean, this report really does highlight the amount of effort that Freedom Leisure have put in over the last 18 to 24 months, and how difficult of trading circumstances that have been, and they should be commended on the amount of effort that put in. Obviously, there's still a lot of challenging situations to come ahead and how they've responded. Some of the committee members have highlighted regarding youth provision within the city, and that there's a specific gap between the ages of 12 and 16 and how we're engaging with them. So I'll be really interested to hear what else we can do, if anything at all, to increase participation in sport and leisure within that age group, and obviously using other partners within the city, whether it be WCT, Worcester Community Trust, or Worcester Play Council, to ensure that the targeted provision is being met. One of the biggest highlights, I think, the success of this is actually the swimming. It's my personal mission, obviously, to ensure everybody in the city is able to have access to a pool and is able to swim if they are able to. And the figures are fantastic. And over the coming year and next 2 years, we'll find other ways to ensure that no child, woman or man is left behind in terms of that. And we've got, we've had a number of high-profile drownings. We've got the Drowning Prevention Society within the city, and our aims to ensure everybody is able to swim, and it's all credit to Freedom Leisure and the fact that we built a new swimming pool. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to do what we've done within the city, in the city in terms of swimming. In terms of tennis, I think there's obviously still a way to go. Our members in St John's have consistently called for more accessible sessions. I think we've made some considerable effort and kept fees and charges low in terms of accessibility, but retention rate seems to be the issue in terms of our membership within the tennis cohort in terms of tennis memberships. And why aren't we retaining all those memberships, or why aren't we increasing those memberships, and what we can do? And the final question is I mean, certainly in terms of tennis, there's a new form of tennis, obviously paddle tennis. Is there an appetite for it? What can Freedom Leisure do in order to capitalise or provide for that, if there is an appetite for it in the city?
Sure. In terms of the youth provision, absolutely, it's a focus of ours, and it has been throughout the duration of the contract. We need to get through the next few months, and our Active Communities team are a big part of our future plans. So we've already got great links with Worcester Community Trust and other partners within the city. So long may that continue. In terms of the free tennis, as I've expanded on, there's more. We have done a lot, and we need to continue to do that, and we will. We've got a great relationship with the LTA, who are providing support throughout this period for us in terms of trying to attract more coaches and so on. So there's lots of initiatives out there which we've currently got underway within the LTA. So hopefully I can start to share some of the case studies with you throughout the quarterly reports, which would be fantastic. In terms of the women and girls, absolutely. In terms of the swim school, we need to keep that going, and we've had discussions before about the primary school, so that's absolutely back on our radar now. It was in the pre-COVID times, and it's I'll be honest, we haven't got it back up and running at this present time. So we've had some conversations recently with Alan on how we can roll that out and absolutely make sure that everybody can swim 25 meters by the time that they leave primary school. It's concerning. Every summer we have the same issues. There's always, unfortunately, a drowning, and we need to try and prevent that as best as possible, and we'll do everything we can. We've got great relationships with the RLSS in terms of we've rolled out support in terms of drowning prevention weeks, and we've done lots of work with them in the past, and we'll continue to do that. Did I answer everything or not? Yeah, I'll need to look into that one if I'm honest.
No problem. Alan?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to kind of give you an update on that. In terms of paddle tennis, we did engage with Boughton Park because there was an interest in them providing new paddle tennis facilities there. However, I understand that recently they've decided not to pursue that option any further. Can look into the reasons as to why that is, but as I say, I understand at the moment that there isn't an intention to move forward with that. I assume because of the cost implications given the current climate.
No problem, thank you. The report in recommendations is 1.1, that the Communities Committee notes the content of the report. Are we all happy to note it? Note it. Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Alan.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Agenda item 6 then, we have setting of the budget for the 23-24 and medium-term financial plan for 27-28. Shane?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. This is the stage we've reached in our cycle of setting the budget for the forthcoming year, and many of you will be familiar with this stage of the process. For those of you who are new to it, what we do at this stage is just set out the overall budgets for each of the committees so that we are conscious of the extent of the spend within each area and start to think about whether or not we want to change priorities, look at things in a different way, consider other activities that we might want to pursue, and if we do that, then what areas are we going to release in order to free up the funding to do that. Communities Committee has around about £3 million in total in terms of its spend, and about a third of that is recovered in income. One of the things we'll be looking for members to consider this year is how our fees and charges are set and whether or not we can try to recover as much as we can in terms of the increases in the cost of living and so on, the inflation impacts which are hitting the expenditure side. So there'll be quite a bit of discussion about that this year's budget. In terms of the second appendix and the third, we look at the capital programme as a whole. So rather than trying to break those down into individual committees, because a lot of the capital work covers a wide range of areas. So again, that's just for information so members can see the whole range of things which we're doing. It's important to recognise that we got most of the spend is in the first year, and then it tends to be less committed in future years. So there's some which are rolling expenditure, but even if it is in 22-23, it's not necessarily going to be spent in this year. It's in the budget to make sure that we go through the right process in terms of the capital business plan and so on. And then the final paper that we've had, which was a late paper, my apologies for that, we every year look at where the committee has committed spend within the city plan. So this is through the general reserves which we have available. You can see that a number of projects have been delivered, which is good, always good to report that. And the comments in the progress columns are not so much a definitive statement of where we are, but a reflection of the dialogue we're having with service managers at the moment about whether there's any plans to spend any remaining funding in respect of those areas. Obviously, the biggest one is the housing for vulnerable tenants, which was put aside a few years ago to find ways of which we can improve our temporary accommodation provision. There are still a number of potential schemes. We've had the ARC report, which has talked a lot about homelessness and how we might intervene and improve that. And we have a report coming to Income Management Committee next week to look at one particular scheme that we might explore. So there are still potential commitments against those areas of funding. But what we are planning to do is to bring together the range of items in the city plan across all the committees to the decision-making point in February in Policy and Resources, and we'll look at the range of resources which remain to us, in the hope that we can cover the growing gap in our in-year finances, which we are aware of, and those of you who are at the all members briefing at the beginning of October will recall there's a significant growing gap, and there is a significant gap for the following year as well. So we need to be sure that we have sufficient reserves to meet our short-term needs while we're trying to work out a longer-term plan, closing that through the medium-term financial plan. As I say, this is primarily for background at this stage, to give members a thought and start to think about things. Can I make the usual plea that if there are any ideas or things you want to explore, let me know as soon as possible. The earlier, much time as we have, we can do some work and support any ideas which we want to take forward to P&R in February. It is without doubt there is going to be a question of choice this time, so we need to be very clear that they are robustly defendable proposals if you want to take them through into that stage. Okay, here endeth the sermon. Thank you. If there are any questions that I can answer at this stage, then by all means I'll be happy to do so.
Thank you, Shane. I've got Councillor De Serra.
Chair, I do have an idea that I might like to discuss, but as a relatively new member, or completely new member to this part of the financial process, I don't know what the process is. So would I be able to speak with you separately about that at some point?
By all means, yes, drop me a line, John, and I'll talk it over. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more speakers on the item? So can we note the process then and the report? All those in favour? Thank you. That's noted. Agenda item 7 is the draft homelessness and rough leases strategy, 2023 to 2025. Tom?
Thank you, Chair. So just to provide a bit of context, local authorities have a duty to publish a homelessness strategy every 5 years. In Worcestershire, districts have worked together to deliver a combined strategy, and we've taken a decision to review this on a 3-yearly basis, largely due to take into account the changing picture of homelessness and rough sleeping, and to make it as dynamic as reasonably practical and possible. The strategy has links with other strategies which span across the county. So the health and wellbeing strategies have recently been adopted, and this strategy is a sub-strategy of the homelessness housing strategy, which is nearing completion for adoption, and that's a county-wide strategy as well. Rough sleeping and homelessness has been quite different over the past three years. When the previous strategy was produced, COVID wasn't a topic of conversation, and that did shift the nature of homelessness presentations, as well as the demand. So it flipped things on its head, and moved things very much away from our traditional prevention model to dealing with people presenting as needing immediate accommodation. There were also a number of changes with government schemes such as Everyone In and Protect and Vaccinate, where we were given specific dedicated funding to provide accommodation to rough sleepers. So this strategy has been developed in consultation with each of the 6 districts across the county. It's concluded a review of the data, homelessness data. It's also involved consultation with individuals that have lived experience, so to try and get the input of people that have experienced homelessness, as well as stakeholder questionnaires and a consultation event earlier in the year. as I think probably all of this committee is aware, there's significant demand on social housing, and over the past couple of years in particular, there's been less supply coming through from registered providers due to a number of factors, and that does place additional pressure on the whole process essentially. So does put more pressure on homelessness services. And in us accommodating people through temporary accommodation. Across in Worcester, we have around 3,000 people currently registered on the housing register, around about 13,000 across the whole county, and about 50% of those are families. Alongside the pressures on social housing, private rented housing is limited, particularly in Worcester. It has high barriers of entry, often less affordable, not always of the same quality as social housing, and that's becoming increasingly a pressure with individuals facing financial hardship. We recognise that Worcester City faces significant pressures around homelessness and rough sleeping, and in particular faces quite different challenges to other districts across the county. It's got a different geographical makeup and a whole range of different services that operate within the city, and certainly has different demographics also. Although we're adopting the county-wide strategy, we've developed a Worcester-specific action plan, and the purpose of that is to ensure that we're focusing on the specific priorities and needs that we've identified within Worcester City specifically. We've themed those into 7 core themes. So under the overarching focus of prevention, intervention and recovery, the 7 core themes that we've identified as priorities in Worcester are reducing rough sleeping, increasing the supply of affordable and supported housing, increasing the supply and reducing the use of temporary accommodation, improving service delivery, improving mechanisms and reducing homelessness approaches, support provision, and underneath and surrounding all of that, partnership working. Tackling homelessness and rough sleeping is not something that the City Council can do in isolation. The action plan will be reviewed annually to ensure that it is responsive and it is focused on any key and emerging priorities that may present as time goes on. So we're seeking approval to go out to public consultation on the strategy. So although there's been work and consultation to develop the draft strategy in its current form, we're now seeking to go out to formal public consultation for a period of 6 weeks on the Worcestershire-wide strategy and the Worcester City action plan, with a view of it being adopted in the new year. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, I'll open it out to the floor. Do we have any speakers on the item, please? Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Tom, thanks very much for that. It's quite a comprehensive report there. Page 46, when the bullet points down the bottom, talks about the exploring further opportunities to co-locate housing staff with other organisations. This is, I mean, it's a brilliant way forward. I've seen from various other organisations how actually working together, it just promotes whatever you're trying to do. So I'd be interested now if you get any further with that, if that is moving on. And then I suppose going along the same line from that, you're talking about developing, reviewing and refreshing protocols for young people, but also for prison leavers. I'm just wondering, are you getting prison leavers sort of turning up with the association without sort of prior notification that they're effectively on their way? Because that can cause a heck of a lot of work. We know that these people are so vulnerable. Yeah, I think you see where I'm coming from.
Yeah, just on the first point, I mean, we do work with a number of agencies. We've got the Housing Advice Centre on Trinity Street, and we open that to other agencies. which is really useful for us to access them, as well as them to access the individuals that need that help and support that are coming in naturally to see us for housing and homelessness advice. I think the one thing that we need to sort of build upon is to go out to others a little bit more. We are doing sessions in the job centre in Worcester currently, again, to try and capture people that might need housing and homelessness support, but there's more to be done around that. In relation to prison leavers, there is a duty to refer by the prison service, so they should be notifying us in advance of prison discharge. That does happen, not always, but we have done a piece of work recently across the county to review the pathway for prison leavers and to make that much more robust. So certainly moving forward, we're going to have a much stronger and much more robust pathway for people leaving prison, including the provision of suitable accommodation for them to go into and make it as successful as possible. So, yeah.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Wachowski, Lawrence and then Hodgson.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Tom. I have two questions. The first one relates to the governance around the strategy. And in terms of the lines of accountability, I'm struggling, and this could be just my confusion, so if you can clarify, that would be really helpful. So in terms of the accountability for the delivery of this strategy, are we clear that, excuse me, it's the elected members and this committee, or are we talking about the delegated powers to the officers who's accountable? So I would appreciate a clarification on that. And in terms of a procedural question, so this is a start of a 6-week consultation. One of the recommendations, I think it's 1.3, suggests that we delegate to the head of Homes and Community, that will be you, to make the amendments and note the changes to the strategy. Could I please ask for, and I'm not sure if other colleagues will agree with this, for the site of those improvements incorporated in the strategy to be shared with the members rather than before the next committee meeting? Is it January? Would it be possible, please? So those are my two questions.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on the first one, I think I'd answer that by saying that, you know, members set policy, officers implement it. So I think the job of this committee is to hold officers to account for implementing those actions. So ultimately, you know, this committee have responsibility, but you know, you delegate us to do the work, and you have the oversight. In terms of the second question around the current delegation, the reason we've done that is I think there are other councillors who are slightly ahead of us in terms of they've already started consulting. So we are probably last in the pack, and we use delegations sometimes just from a point of view of prudency, really, to try and get on, or, you know, get on with it, I suppose. So I think it's the recommendation is that delegation is provided to Tom in consultation with Councillor Riaz and Councillor Cleary. But really, I think it'd be a matter for Councillor Riaz and Councillor Cleary as Vice Chair and Chair to comment on that one.
Sure. Councillor Shaskell, was there anything of particular concern you were worried about in terms of the process? What?
Yes, so I'll share an example, if I may. So in terms of the governance, I think when we are approaching the any kind of central government funding, whether it's ourselves or the stakeholders, people who provide the homelessness provision in the City Council, I think having the sort of clear line of accountability included in the strategy would be quite helpful. As in, I probably said this before in this committee, some kind of graphic representation of the accountability, because I think this is one of the key criteria around awarding some of the homelessness money which is put aside by the government. So that would be the reason. I think just to assure the colleagues that we have a sight of this before it gets signed off. That was my only reason.
Under this one, I think this is the strategy that's been consulted rather than any allocation of funding. So I'm assuming that the process would be that after the consultation, the recommendations will come back and then we fully adopt it in January. Is that right?
Sorry, Chair, at the moment, like many other reports of this nature, the recommendation is that any changes or any amendments that are proposed through the consultation process, rather than come back to a full committee, myself and Tom, or Tom in particular, would work up those amendments into an amended document and then consult with the Chair and Vice Chair for final approval. It wouldn't come back to this committee. That's the current recommendation.
That's fine, thank you. And that seems to be a standard process for across all committees rather than just our committee.
Not everything, but yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you, Chair. Very much related to the questions that have just been asked by Councillor Petrovsky. Two questions. In the final version of this strategy, will we see clearer strategic objectives and the outcome measures, and not the input or process measures that will enable those of us who are accountable to understand how effective the strategy is working? That's question one. Clearly not my own. Yeah, let's do it one at a time, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we can take anything on board, any comments or recommendations. So if that's a recommendation to include as part of the consideration with the amendments, then that's certainly something we're happy to take away.
Thank you, because very much a reiteration of a question I asked at a different committee on Monday night about having smart objectives, but slightly more eloquently worded than the one I asked then. Question number two. The government has recently announced its new rough sleeping strategy, which carries £2 billion worth of funding over the next 3 years. And that £2 billion includes £200 million for the new single homelessness accommodation programme and £360 million for the homelessness prevention grant. How will this strategy that we're discussing tonight ensure that we gain as much national funding as possible to help homeless people in Worcester?
In relation to the single homeless accommodation programme, I mean, that's a sort of standalone programme. So we've been identified in Worcester as being able to bid for that, to bid for funding. It's not available to all local authorities, but Worcester is one of those that's been selected. So as it currently stands, we've expressed an interest in that, but the prospectus and the detail around what that will involve is yet to come out. So we would be looking to use particularly our action plan and the focus on Worcester City Council in particular to inform the bid that we would submit to try and to allocate funding around that programme. In relation to the homeless prevention grant, that's issued, it's calculated through a number of means, through the data returns that we provide back to government, the number of people we have in temporary accommodation, the various different metrics that contribute towards that calculation. So that will be allocated sort of independently, I suppose, as opposed to on the back of the contents of our homelessness and rough sleepers strategy. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you. Quick comment. I think the two questions I've asked about smart objectives and getting money for Worcester are very much related. Probably to use David Blake's phrase, teaching people to suck eggs. But when you're applying for money, the more specific and local the information is, the better. But
Yeah, I mean,
that anyway. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lawrenson. I mean, just to reiterate the point in terms of your second question, I think we've really have demonstrated in Worcester that we've gone above and beyond in terms of our compassion and how we've effectively dealt with rough sleepers within the county over the last decade or so. We've improved, and it's the COVID pandemic showed how we came together united with outside stakeholders and in terms of dealing with them. So we have got a track record of delivery. We are a compassionate city. We are a destination, so to speak, in terms of that. Take it how you will, but that just shows how good we are at dealing with that, and then hopefully that should demonstrate to central government that we are worthy of a fair share of slice of that funding. Councillor Hodgson.
I just like to comment around the increasing supply around single person and supported living. Last year, Stephen and myself were at the opening of some flats on Shore Street. And I wonder if there's any more flats like that within the system for single people coming out of homelessness.
Yeah, I mean it's an area. I mean, supported housing generally is an area that is there's under supply of access for all social housing. I'm not 100% familiar on Shore Street and the nature of that provision, but
and they were, I think, about 10 flats, and they were for homelessness people. And I wondered about if there was anything else in the pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things which are working through. So schemes such as that, I don't think that received any or required any council funding to support that provision. But we do work with municipal and a range of other partners. The CAB have a range of HMOs that they provide accommodation support to, which we work very closely with in facilitating access into those. Obviously, St Paul's is an established organisation in the city that we work closely with. I think that the general picture is that supply across the board for all types of accommodation is not where we would want it to be. So we are working across the board to increase provision throughout. We're currently developing our housing enabling strategy on the back of the ARC report that was mentioned earlier. So that's something that will help inform, and focus resources as to where the data is telling us we need to provide that provision.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Cleary.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to say thanks for the report and the officer. But I've got a quick query about page 58, which is the graph of the Worcestershire rough sleep account. It's really encouraging to see that number's going down, but there isn't a figure for 2022. So I just want to double check. Are these totted up April figures, as in April to April, or are these year-end figures, and that's why we haven't seen it just yet?
Thanks. Yeah. So the rough sleeper count, it's an annual process. So it's done on one night per year. So it's to give a snapshot picture of rough sleeping on any one night throughout the year. The 2022 one has happened a few weeks ago, but the figures have still been verified. Generally they're published in around February next year, so we have to respond back to government. It's verified and processed to make sure that we've complied with the set criteria, and then it's published next year.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers on the item? No. Just a couple of comments on questions from my side. I mean, considering that sexual offences against women and domestic abuse and relationship breakdowns are generally on the increase. And in relation to something what Councillor Hodgson said in terms of availability of units, with the crises that we're facing, are we sufficiently prepared for some of those scenarios and unveiling, and in terms of availability in the both private sector and bed and breakfast, etc., in terms of availability of properties?
Yeah, I mean, we're able to meet demand. I mean, in terms of domestic abuse specifically, a piece of work was undertaken when the Domestic Abuse Act came into force to identify the need across the county, including what the specific need in Worcester City was to provide safe accommodation. So we're actually in the process of procuring some additional units through a registered provider to have direct access into those units of accommodation. But the fact we don't have those currently doesn't preclude us from being able to access alternative means of safe accommodation. It's to increase that provision and to improve that provision. So yeah, we have access. We're able to meet demand, but services are under pressure, I suppose would be the summary.
Sure. And I mean, in terms of the cost of living crisis and potential evictions and things like that, how will that affect our ability to deliver on this project?
Yeah, so we've recognised in the strategy that the cost of living crisis is likely to have an impact on homelessness and potentially rough sleeping. Exactly what the impact of that will be is, I suppose, still yet to be realised. But that's something that we've got a close, we're keeping a close eye on so that we can react quickly. We haven't seen any huge uplift specifically around affordability issues. We're not starting to see a great spike in people approaching to say that their accommodation is unaffordable, which would be an indicator to suggest that that's having a specific impact. So it's something we're aware of, we've recognised in the strategy, and I think, and in our action plan, and I think that's something that we'll develop over the next year, and maybe something that we need to strengthen moving forward.
Thank you, Tom. Can the recommendations, can we take 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 and 1.4 on block? All those happy to approve? So we'll go through 1.1 then. All those in favour of 1.1? Okay, so 1.1 is carried. So, sorry, anybody against? Any abstentions? No. 1.2, all those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? That's unanimous. 1.3, all those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? That's carried. And 1.4, all those in favour? Any against? Okay, and any abstentions? No, so that's carried. Thank you, Tom, for that report. Agenda item 8, which is the protection and engagement of private renters. Is that you, Tom?
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Chair. So on the 5th of July this year, the Council agreed a motion to instruct officers to compile an action plan for consideration at this committee, identifying measures of how the Council can further protect and engage with private renters. So that's what we're bringing to committee this evening. The motion sought confirmation of how the authority could provide support to renters with a focus on serving compliance notices for excess cold in homes that fail the minimum energy efficiency standards, training and information provided to councillors on how the council can help residents in rented properties, an information pack provided by the council including how to access any help for private renters, and the feasibility of a confidential reporting system for tenants. Worcester has approximately 8,000 private rented properties, and of those, 515 who have a registered EPC that falls beneath the energy performance standard. We recognise that further work is required to analyse the data of this. It's a national database of energy performance certificates, but a number of those may be inaccurate. So there is a piece of work that needs to be done to go through those 515 who are registered, who have an EPC that falls beneath the standard, as well as identifying those that may not have a registered EPC, which is also obviously of a concern. We've had a number of exemptions registered. I think it's approximately 30 people that have applied for an exemption. There's a number of specific criteria whereby people can apply for an exemption. And for each of those, we need to investigate whether or not they're eligible for that exemption or not. Where a property falls beneath the necessary standard of an E-rating on their energy performance certificate, a compliance notice can be issued. This requires the landlord to provide specific information to consider whether a penalty notice should be issued. Where evidence is provided that proves that the property meets the standard, the necessary standard, then no further action would be taken. But a penalty notice would be issued if people fail to supply the relevant information, or if it's confirmed that the property is not at the required standard. So in the past 6 months, the council's issued 20 compliance notices, and that's led to 5 returning and demonstrating that the properties do meet the required minimum standard. 5 have been issued with penalty notices, and the remaining 10 haven't responded, so will be due to be issued penalty notices. We do recognise, as you might see from the figures, that there is a need to upscale this area of work. So it's something that has been under-resourced ultimately, and we have identified some funding to be able to recruit to an additional officer within the private sector housing team, so that to provide a dedicated resource and focus to this area of work, to the meat enforcement work. So an action plan has been developed in order to implement the council motion, and that includes a mixture of training, raising awareness, as well as enforcement activities across the city in the private rented sector. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen Hodgson.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much for this. It's very interesting actually seeing how a motion that was approved by the council in July has so quickly appeared with all these particular action points. I would guess some of these action points would have been done anyway, regardless of the motion. So which are the new action points that are being undertaken as a result of this particular motion being passed? And in terms of them, how well on target are you in terms of achieving all these?
I'd probably struggle to identify what wouldn't have been done had the motion not been passed, and what would have been done, and whether or not that would have been pulled together into into an action plan like it's been presented to committee this evening. It is an area of work that we know is a priority for us as a council, and is certainly a priority for members of the community. So it is something that we've been keen to tackle more robustly. We did have a member of staff who we diverted and provided a specific focus on some of this work. Unfortunately, that member of staff moved on to another position. So we've been without a specific focused resource, which is what we recognise is needed, and that's why we're progressing along those lines. So I probably struggle to really say exactly what would or wouldn't have been done. In terms of where we're at and meeting timescales, I think the nearest targets are towards the end of November. So we're well progressed with those action points. So we're on target to meet those, and we anticipate them to be done. I think one thing that I would say around timescales, and particularly in relation to the number of properties that have been identified, the way that this process works is, if we were to go out tomorrow and issue 515 compliance notices, which theoretically could be done, the work that then subsequently generates to process those, if there's appeals, and to issue the enforcement work beyond that, takes some time, and we've got to sort of do it in a staged and in a staged process. So we're trying to be pragmatic in the approach that we're taking to make sure that we're able to succeed with.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that was one of the concerns that we had in terms of being able to deliver it on time, and in terms of that, and I'm glad you highlighted the resource issue that we've got. Hopefully that should be overcome pretty soon. Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just wanted to pick some highlights, really, not so much question, more of a comment. Famous last words. So I like the fact there are named officers in the action plan. I mean, I know it's different to a strategy. I do get the difference between a strategy and an action plan, but I still think it's worth highlighting that one thing that makes this action plan particularly strong, in my opinion, is the fact it has named officers as well as dates. So thank you for that. And as someone who's rented privately, I'm sure many of us have, I was particularly pleased to see that amongst the actions are the creation of a leaflet to be disseminated, outlining private tenanting rights and responsibilities, including useful points of contact. I mean, if we needed help, then we certainly do in these times. So having contacts shared with people would be hugely helpful. And promoting tenants' rights and responsibilities, and as I've just said, useful tips. I mean, it says particularly through social media, but I just think the point is that, you know, we're sharing useful tips with people is going to be massively appreciated, particularly in these times. And for the council to be taking such a proactive view on private renting is going to be a really popular move. So thank you very much for your work on this.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrenson. Councillor Cleary.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks for the report to the officer. I've just got a couple of quick questions on regarding page 97, where it says we've got 457 properties that were identified. To me, that seems quite high. That's like 7 or 8% of the rental stock. I've known about EPCs for goodness knows how long, and I find it strange. In fact, I don't believe they don't. But the main point of my comment is, of these 457, there's two things missing that I would have liked to have seen. That's where they are in the city and how many landlords is this relevant to? Because this isn't going to be 457 landlords with a single property each. So I'd be interested to know those two things, whereabouts they are and how many landlords does it relate to? Would you be able to provide that to us at some point?
Yeah, that's, I mean, I don't have that information to me to hand, but yeah, that's part of the process that we need to go through around, part of it's data cleansing, so we know that there'll be properties within that number that are compliant and their EPCs aren't up to date on the system. We know that there'll be people out there who aren't on the system that do have below standard EPCs as well, so the figure, I suppose, is indicative, but not necessarily anything confirmed. Yeah, you're probably quite right that some landlords may have multiple properties, so it wouldn't necessarily apply to that many individual landlords. But yeah, we can provide that information.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Mackay and then this Councillor De Serra.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, it's quite an expensive exercise, but worthwhile at the same time. I see that the cost of a cost to a landlord should be no more than about £3,500 if they're going to take up all the energy efficiency ideas that are obviously being suggested to them. You just tell me how much the fine is, please.
Yeah, the cap on the works is up to £3,500. So if works cost more than £3,500, then there's a potential that they can apply for an exemption due to the cost of the works. The fine's up to £5,000.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I just wanted to make sure that we are talking about making it a worthwhile exercise in as far as the fine isn't more, shall we say, productive than the actual putting on the work. Okay, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you. Councillor De Serra.
Thank you. I've got a couple of little questions and then a slightly bigger one. On 98, we seem to have got the 31st of November. Is that actually December or is it the 30th of November? For a little way further down just below the middle of the page on 98, just so I know when it's due. That's yeah, it's a typo. So which is
the recruitment? We've got the interviews in the next 2 weeks, so
no, it's the typo. Just want to know which date we should be looking for. 31st November.
30th of November.
30th. Thank you. That's I'm sorry to pick on it, but I just wanted to know. The penultimate line of the table, or cell of the table, I just didn't quite understand it. It might be right, but just help me out. Review of data sources to ensure any HMO or empty property are removed from the EPC register. So no HMOs are on the register, is that correct?
No, HMOs may be on the register,
right.
But they wouldn't be enforceable because of the shared nature of the properties. So that's one of the areas that we need to look at is are they exempt or are they not?
So you didn't mean all of them then, it's just some. That's okay. I understand that. And when it comes to the inspection timetable, is there going to be enough time, do you think, to do your highest priority inspections and deliver any notices as the weather gets worse over the time? Is that going to be an issue for how you're going to implement these next steps?
No, the weather shouldn't have any impact on the work of going out and inspecting properties, no.
Not the inspections, but when you go back, if people appeal and you do enforcement notices, and if the idea is to make sure the work's done, is all of that process going to have enough time to roll through before we get into the worst of the winter? That's really my problem, my question on this point.
Yeah, so we're not going to be able to address the energy performance of all the properties before winter, no. So it's something this is going to take probably up to 2 years to realistically get around all of the properties to do that enforcement work.
I could understand why that's the case. Is there a prioritisation going on then of any sort, or you just sort of tackled them in some particular order?
Yeah, so again, so I think we've specified that within the report that we're looking at through that data cleansing exercise. Once we know exactly the properties that we need to investigate, we'll be doing that on a priority basis. So with the worst performing properties first.
Thank you. Councillor Lucy Hodgson.
This is a stupid question, but private renters, are they, is it also including the housing associations and that sort of thing, or is it sort of privately owned houses?
Yeah, this just relates to private rented properties, not social housing, so it won't include registered providers.
Okay, do we have any more speakers on the item?
I don't think a question was inappropriate or anything. It just occurred to me, what about leaseholders? Because they would be paying rent on part of the property. But this is private sector rather than, so leaseholders are not touched.
Leaseholders, so
I'm thinking about shared ownership. So that's why I think your question wasn't.
No, mine was private rented or social housing, sort of people, so platform and that sort of thing, or private rented accommodation.
Yeah. So this scheme only applies to private rented, Chair, not the social rented properties or shared ownership.
Yeah.
Anything else on that? No, fine. Any other speakers on the item? No. I mean, I think in the words of Councillor Lawrence, and in terms of where we've got to regarding this and the severity of the situation in terms of us being able to respond, I think it was a really timely motion that took into consideration the national picture at the time to respond to a cost of living crisis and a real practical way in which this City Council can help that sector to improve the state and condition of our housing stock and to hold, private rented landlords to account. And hopefully the officers have the tools and the resources to be able to execute that. And it's really, really important that we do it in a timely fashion so that we can get the housing stock improved. One of the questions that I had was around in terms of, at the moment, the source of our information seems to be around EPC. How do we protect the any complaints that we get from residents and from tenants in terms of that? How do we guarantee their anonymity in these situations in terms of reporting landlords?
Individuals can report currently anonymously on by the website. So there's a report it functions. If they choose not to put their name in there, then it wouldn't appear. The reality is so we can go on the back of anonymous reports to go and inspect properties, and we have powers to do that. The implication is generally that it's often quite apparent where the reports come from if we're going to inspect. So we're happy to retain that anonymity if that's how people wish to progress that. But obviously, if we're going to inspect a property and subsequent action arises as a result of that, then sometimes it's apparent where it comes from. But that's not something that we divulge. So we can guarantee anonymity and not provide details of where the complaint came from as it stands.
Thank you. Then we'll go to the recommendation on 1.1 that the committee notes the content of the report, and 1.2 approves the action plan as set out in Appendix 1. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 9, procurement of the single person and childless couples homeless prevention support service, otherwise known as HOPES. Tom?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this relates to the single person and childless couples contract, which was first commissioned in 2016, subsequently recommissioned in 2019 and extended earlier by authority of this committee earlier this year, and that extended the contract up until March 2023. And the purpose of that extension was to allow for the review of the service and recommissioning to take place and to come back, which is what we're doing this evening. This service involves intervention and prevention of homelessness for single people and childless couples. Many of those often don't meet the priority need conditions of the homelessness legislation. And it also provides support to make individuals tenancy ready, so sort of floating tenancy support service. In Worcester, 60 people in the year 2021 to 2022, 60 people received the homeless prevention support service and 97 the floating tenancy support service. The other element of this contract provides the management of the severe weather emergency protocol, which some members may know as SWEP, and that ensures that all people are offered safe and warm accommodation in particularly severe weather conditions. In 2021-22, SWEP was activated 30 times, and it was accessed by 45 individuals, and that was irrespective of their eligibility of homeless legislation, so that the ordinary eligibility criteria don't apply during SWEP. Consultation's been undertaken with stakeholders, and again we've also done consultation with people who have lived experience here, so the client group that we're looking to support through this contract to help inform the future specification of the service. We've also undertaken a review of the existing provision, and it identified the need to provide a more tailored approach to housing related support, both to make it more tailored to the individual, but also to the district and the local authority area. Redesign of the performance indicators, including a tool to measure the progress of an individual, so something along the lines of a sort of star matrix. Dedicated resources focused on SWEP, so the current provision has been picked up amongst different people, so it's not necessarily as streamlined as it could be, and then to review the district's funding allocation. So it's a county-wide contract with a total annual contract value of £301,500, with Worcester being the lead authority, as it has been since it was first commissioned. Worcester City's contribution to the contract is £65,646, and that will be funded through the Homeless Prevention Grant. So we're bringing the paper to committee this evening to propose approval of the procurement of the contract. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I'll open it up to the floor. Councillor Stephen Hodgson.
I've got a question which might sound strange. Point 2.6, where it describes the process where you do these various exercises, where the tender procedures opened in November 2022, which we're only just starting now, and the end procedure will be at December 2022. But we've already got figures in terms of funding and that. Might be with tendering, normally you tender something and you don't know how much you're actually going to pay for it until you receive the tenders. So how come we know what we're going to pay when the, according to 2.6, the tender has only just opened?
yeah, it's not unusual to set a tender exercise with an upper value. So that's how we're setting this one out. We know the amount that we've spent previously. We know the amount that councils are willing to commit to budget for this. So that's what we'll set within the tender process.
So aren't they likely therefore just to put a figure in of that one rather than a lower figure if they know what our cards are on the table?
There's always a risk of that, but there will be a full procurement process. So we'll have a chance to analyse and interrogate any submissions that are put forward. And if we feel they aren't best value, we can push back on that and pick that up with them.
Have Councillor Lucy Hodgson and Councillor Cleary.
On 3, I noticed that a market engagement event was held. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, I mean, essentially it was to sort of understand what providers may be interested in participating in the contract, who may submit a tender. It was an opportunity to be able to answer any questions of those stakeholders, so if they were wanting to clarify any points around what the contract may look like. Obviously, we haven't shared the details of the contract or the procurement exercise. Yeah, it was a sort of soft market testing, I suppose, essentially to see who's out there, try and gauge any feedback from them, and also to provide an opportunity for them to ask us any questions.
And what's the difference? At the time of securing the last contract, there was quite a bit of sort of concern about it. So what's the difference between the last contract and the next one?
I mean, the principles of the contract remain the same. So the focus of the services around homeless prevention, tenancy support and sweat provision. So there have been some amendments made to the specification, which I couldn't just reel off the exact details of that. But as part of the review process of the current contract, amendments have been made, both and taken into account other districts' input, because it is a county-wide contract. So we're not just continuing with the same contract and issuing it in the same format. The principles remain the same. There have been some amendments. One of the most notable ones, I suppose, is around the performance management of that. So one of the things which we recognised before we extended the contract for the period September to March next year was that we needed a bit more information and better performance indicators to monitor and manage and assess success. And that's partly due to the changing nature of some of the clients and the people that the service has been providing. So we've put those in place for the extension period to take that into account.
Districts that perhaps the more rural parts that perhaps have they've got sort of more sort of discretion and everything, and perhaps they've only got 2 or 3 people, but they still want to help them and that sort of thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary.
Thanks, Chairman. Just a couple of quick dating errors I've noticed on 2.6. I assume the award of the contract is 2023, not 2022, and the mobilisation is 2023 as well, just so that they're amended for the record.
Thank you. We'll get those sorted, right?
Yeah.
Any other questions? No? In that case, then we'll go to the recommendations. Are we happy to take them on block? Yeah. Okay. The committee recommends 1.1 to 1.4. All those in favour? Carried, yeah. Thank you. Agenda item number 10, procurement of the Housing First service. Tom?
Thank you. Last one for me, don't worry. Okay, so just to provide a bit of context again for anybody that isn't aware of this service. So Housing First, it's an approach to support homeless people with high needs and histories of sustained and recurrent homelessness. Often those individuals have been rough sleeping or had periods of rough sleeping in the past. And the purpose is to help them access and sustain independent accommodation. The process involves the provision of a house first, and then with intensive and personalised wraparound support put in once they've secured a tenancy. And this broadly differs from other models and more traditional approaches whereby people were provided support to get them to a point where they were considered as tenancy ready before the offer of accommodation. And I think it's recognised that where people have particularly complex needs or adverse histories, it's very difficult to get people to that place where they might be considered in ordinary terms tenancy ready. So it's to give them the property and then put all of that support in place to make it sustainable. The current contract that we've got in place commenced in February 2020. It's a pilot scheme and it's been delivered county-wide by St Paul's Hostel here in Worcester. In Worcester we've got 12 participants on the scheme and it's currently at full capacity. The government's rough sleeper strategy acknowledges Housing First and that it has a strong evidence base internationally to support individuals with multiple and complex needs to stay off the streets for good. And it addresses the disadvantages faced by people sleeping rough, which can often be sort of multiple and complex. An independent evaluation by the University of Worcester has been commissioned to review this service, and we're due to receive the final report imminently. Unfortunately, it hasn't arrived in time for tonight's committee. But the interim reports that have been undertaken throughout the current contract have identified multiple successes from the scheme. It does also recognise that progress can be very slow for some of these individuals in achieving long-term sustainable tenancies, and it can be a real challenge for some participants. So it's not something that happens overnight. It is very much a longer-term, slow and gradual process. So this contract has benefits to multiple partners and the wider public purse, essentially, including the criminal justice system, health, care providers. So often we've seen reductions in criminality, people potentially entering into prison, better health outcomes. So moving forward, there is an opportunity for us to explore funding from those various different partners moving forward. And we're hoping that the evidence base from the university will support that. So this is a county-wide contract. The total contract value, £349,810, with Worcester being the lead authority. Again, it's been the lead authority since the contract started. Worcester's contribution to this contract is £99,946, and that's funded through DLUHC grant funding via the Rough Sleeper Initiative and the Homeless Prevention Grant. So we're proposing approval for the procurement of this contract also. Chair.
Thank you. I'll open it up to the floor. Do we have any questions? Councillor Zissera and then Councillor Petrowski.
Thank you. I just wondered how many of the people that you're helping here might have, in another situation, gone into some sort of residential care, and does anybody come the other way onto this?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of going into residential care, potentially, certainly into much worse circumstances, and had they been continued to rough sleep, potentially even death at the extreme end of things. I think part of the challenge with residential care is whether they would have actually gone or engaged or gone. Often people have the need for that level of service but don't necessarily access it, and also behaviour can sometimes be a prohibiting factor. So it's not always, so it often is a challenge. They're presented with challenging behaviour potentially, so that can preclude them from accessing accommodation. So we've been very fortunate. We work closely with registered providers in the city to for them to agree to allow people into the tenancy through the Housing First programme, who ordinarily they would be excluded from social housing as well. So the people that would otherwise really struggle to access any form of accommodation. So potentially, in terms of the other way, I can't think that has happened, but people that have got those complex needs would be eligible and access the service.
The reason for my question is because, you know, over the recent years with care in the community and fewer places being available for people to be, you know, housed in a full-time care situation, I just wondered whether that was in any way a factor. That was all.
Okay, I have Councillor Petrowski, Mackay, and then Lucy Hodgson.
Thank you, Chair. When I read this report, I was actually very, very proud to be part of the local authority that in many ways is pioneering this kind of approach. I remember talking to staff at St. Paul's Hostel about the deep trauma approach that they piloted probably about 3-4 years ago now. They started sort of experimenting with it. And as someone who has had an experience of literally fishing people out of the scrub and bushes as when I used to work for the local authority, I think this is a godsend. So a huge amount of applause and support for this. My question is this: it does mention about the evaluation by the University of Worcester, and then the report talks about the outcomes. What kind of outcomes? Can you please clarify? Is that well-being? Is that perspective of maintaining tenancy? What kind of outcomes?
Yeah, so it's looking at sort of multiple things. So we haven't yet got the final report, which is a little bit frustrating because I was hoping we'd have a bit to be able to talk to it in a bit more detail. But it is around tenancy sustainment. It is about health outcomes. It is about access and return, frequent hospital admissions, access into the criminal justice system. So it is, there are a whole number of outcomes that are being considered as part of that evaluation.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Petrowski stole my thunder. Basically, the question I had was in relation to exactly the same thing, the report. But I suppose where I was coming from on it was when it talks about to understand the costs and benefits of Housing First, not necessarily looking at just the benefits to the individual, which are obviously great, but looking to the benefits of society as a whole in relation to the health service, police, prison service, so on and so forth. Because if all those are benefiting from what we are doing, I mean, people like the Police and Crime Commissioner could consider a grant to help towards it. Now, is that something overall that the university is looking at, or was it just sort of benefits really to an individual? Thank you.
Yeah, very much overall benefits to society, including the individual participants that are involved in the scheme. So yeah, it's very much looking at the wider context and the benefits overall. So we should have some real tangible evidence and data and analysis around that.
Yeah, I mean, to follow on from Councillor Mackay's point, obviously, there must be a role for this in terms of the integrated care sector and the VCS that's currently being formed and how we feed into that.
Yeah, it's an important point. I think the work of the district collaborative and the integrated care system, you know, we need to feedback it's a good platform for us to feedback the benefits of Housing First as a scheme, and highlighting adopting approaches such as this can have much wider benefits. I think potentially generally Housing First as a principle and possibly within Worcester, we haven't necessarily highlighted or showcased the benefits more widely, and I think there's a real opportunity for us to do that moving forward. It's not just a housing issue, it's very much more than that.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson.
I'm a bit confused as to what districts are actually going to be covered by this. In 2.5, we seem to have got all the districts. In 2.10, we've got some of the districts, and in 4.1, we've got some of the districts, but not all the districts. So what, because obviously it's a county-wide scheme, so what actual districts are we going to actually form?
Yeah, so the current contract involves all 6 districts, and the proposal moving forward is 5 districts, so excluding White Forest. And the reason for that is that they've got a support service within their existing provisions. They're structured differently, and they're adopting a slightly different model, a housing-led model, as opposed to the Housing First moving forward.
Thank you. If there are any more speakers on the item? If not, can we go to the recommendations and take them on block? Councillor Cleary?
Just quickly following on from that, Redditch is missing from 4.1 in the preferred option.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've done that to you twice now, sorry.
2.10, Redditch is included, 4.1.
Yeah.
It's a Redditch.
Yeah, that's why I was confused.
Okay. Can we go to the recommendations now? Take them on block. Happy to approve? Approved? Yeah. It's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate your efforts. Agenda item 11, Asylum Seekers Full Dispersal Scheme. Lloyd?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, in April of this year, the government wrote to all local councils in the UK, setting out their commitment to improve the asylum system. And one of the key interventions was to reduce and eliminate the use of hotels for asylum seekers by moving to what we call the full dispersal model for asylum accommodation. So 2 reasons for that. Hotel accommodation, staying in that for a long period of time is unsuitable, but also the cost of that to the government, as we see being played out in the press. The Home Office have contracted with 3 organisations to deliver that programme, and the organisation locally that's in charge of that is Serco. And the Home Office sought to quickly discuss with local councils what that full dispersal model would look like for the West Midlands. And representing West Midlands local authorities is an organisation called the West Midlands Strategic Migration Partnership, led by Wolverhampton Council. So working with the Home Office and in collaboration with each council, a regional model was developed, and that was submitted to the Home Office during early October. And that was very much based on what we call a fair shares approach. So each local authority taking their fair share of asylum seekers and properties. The model was underpinned by 4 key principles, and I've set those out at 2.6, Chair. I'm conscious of time, so I won't go through those in any great detail. But as a result of that model, for Worcester, we came out at supporting the programme with 106 bed spaces by December 2023. In terms of properties, that would equate to about 30 private rented properties being procured by Serco, and they work with an average of just over three people per property. And they generally look to take HMO type properties when they procure. Putting that into some context, 30 private rented properties in Worcester, we have around 8,500 private rented properties or properties that are rented rent-free. The Home Office view of that model became clear very quickly, and they very quickly stated that the challenge of procuring properties in the less urban areas, where there were issues around support services and the locality of them, and perhaps some more challenging private rental markets, meant that they felt they would find it difficult to work in line with that model, and they would unlikely to receive approval from them. And since then, the Home Office via Serco have developed their own model, which has now been shared back with the Strategic Migration Partnership, who've duly shared it back to local councils. That model, the alternative model, has focused to continue procuring a significant number of dispersed properties in those larger urban areas that have been doing it since 1999. So the big Mets, the Coventry, where there's already a few thousand, if not more, properties that have been procured for that purpose. The alternative model would seek to continue to procure large numbers of properties in those areas. What that's meant for Worcester is that in the alternative model, rather than the 106 bed spaces, the alternative model is proposing that 66 bed spaces are procured in Worcester up to December next year. So again, a lesser number of properties. However, there is likely to be a minimal impact, because obviously that would take properties out of use for Worcester residents, and they can be the type of properties that are quite attractive, more so because of their the rents that are charged, the lower end of the rental scale. The Home Office has signalled that if agreement can't be found regionally, then they will employ what they're calling a backstop position, which unhelpfully they've not been able to share with us yet. But I think it seems quite evident that the backstop position will be very similar to the Serco alternative model, because Serco have worked it up and Serco are the Home Office contractor. So we can't see it being hugely different to that alternative model. So where we are is that each individual council within the West Midlands region has been asked by the Strategic Migration Partnership to confirm back to them which model, if any, that councils are willing to support, so that they can then report back to Home Office with the region's position. We didn't feel that was an officer decision. We felt that was something that should be put in front of members for members to make a decision on. Since then, Serco have contacted us directly and wish to engage with us on where we feel procurement of these types of property would be better. And the advice given to us by the Strategic Migration Partnership was very much to engage with Serco and have some influence over the process, rather than have no influence at all, and actually properties start to be procured in places with no local intelligence, no knowledge, and there's a struggle for both existing communities and to the tenants themselves. So they are waiting for us to engage them with what we call a hot mapping exercise. That's been scheduled for next Friday, subject to members' decision this evening. And we've invited along police colleagues and health colleagues as well, because we feel they also have a big contribution to make in terms of where properties are procured. And then again, subject to members' decision, once that hot mapping exercise has been carried out, what we will then receive is individual postcode data. As and when Serco locate properties, they will come to us for a final check just to see if there are any red flags from our point of view. In undertaking that hot mapping exercise, at paragraph 2.16, we've just laid out there some of the key factors for us that we'll be feeding back to Serco in terms of when they do come in and look to procure. So the preferred option is set out within the report, Chair, is to confirm back to the Strategic Migration Partnership the Council's preference for the alternative model for 66 bed spaces, equating to around 20 properties. Just to reiterate, Chair, there's been some press coverage in the last couple of days that's been inaccurate. The City Council has no direct involvement in this. Serco are in full control of this. They don't need any permission from us to come into Worcester to procure. Where we are is dealing with the strategic migration partnership, but also in engaging with Serco to have some influence over where properties are procured. But this is not Worcester City Council directly procuring property. This is us trying to engage and influence the process. So, Chair, just to finish, if I can just run you through the recommendations very quickly. Recommendation 1.1 is to note the contents of the report, and in particular the government's commitment to reduce and limit the use of hotels and move to full dispersal. Option 1.2 then is for committee to instruct officers to confirm back to the Strategic Migration Partnership the preference of option. Recommendation 1.3 is to instruct officers to seek agreement from Serco that where possible that an equitable distribution across local districts will be applied. So that relates back to the fair shares approach where possible. And 1.4 is just to seek endorsement, really, that members are happy for us to engage with Serco around the hot mapping exercise and for the council to have some influence before properties are procured. We'll take any questions, Chair.
Open it up to the floor. I'll have Councillor Petrowski and Lawrence and then to Sarah.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you. I was relieved when I saw that you were going to read the report, Lloyd, because poor Tom was taking all the questions before. I've read this report back and forth a few times, and just a bit of a background. I mean, when I saw the preferred provider, it was quite tricky to deal with the bias, considering pretty bad press that Serco has received, and they were subject of many sort of investigations that revealed substandard conditions, Yarwood and various other places, which are quite distressing to hear about and so on. So putting that aside and trying to keep clear mind, I've been in touch and working with, I did mention earlier, asking one of the questions that I used to work for the local authority. For the 5 years that I spent with the local authority, I was in close contact with West Midlands Strategic Migration Partnership. And the job that I did was managing impacts of migration on the local communities and services. This is how I got to know some of the people working for the council, some of the officers as well. Now, my sort of reading of this is we are being asked to confirm the view taken by an organisation which is profit-based. And I really struggle with that. Putting bias to the side, I would encourage most definitely to engage with Serco, but I would urge both the officers and my colleagues to please reconsider a slightly more generous and I think achievable, attainable proposal put forward by West Midlands Strategic Migration Partnership. And the reason for that, when I read about the support structure and whatever, I was thinking about solidarity, which is one of the things that I try to keep as a leading principle in how I engage with council business. Some of the areas where the dispersal scheme has taken place so far are nowhere near to the proportions we are hearing here. Those people are housed in substandard conditions in HMOs, and the headcount is 1 to 68 in some places. I don't think it's fair. I think in the sort of spirit of solidarity, we should be taking our share. And considering that I do understand the tight housing market and everything else, but putting things in a sort of a bit of perspective, I was born in a country that accepted 4 million war refugees starting in February. Places like Lebanon increased the the number of the population by 20% simply by accepting Syrian refugees. So in the grand scheme of things, I think this is something that, going back to the chair's point about how generous and compassionate we are, thriving mosques and everything else, we can certainly afford to be more generous. So I would appeal to colleagues to please reconsider, definitely engage with Serco as well, and ask them to reconsider the strategic migrations partnership proposal to find those additional, is it 10 properties, Lloyd? Sorry.
It would be 20 properties if it was for the alternative model, around about 30 properties if it was for the strategic migration partnership model.
On urge members and colleagues and officers to please reconsider a slightly more generous offer from Worcester. Thank you.
Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I'll be a similar length of time to my colleague, Councillor Petrovsky. I think it's sensible to break it down into 2 questions and a series of comments. So if I ask a question at a time, like I did before. So with reference to page 4, point 4.2, states that the option of not continuing to engage with Serco in respect of where they procure accommodation within the city of Worcester has been discounted. So that sounds to me like an arrangement with Serco is a done deal, in which case, why are we discussing it at this committee? That's question 1.
It's not a done deal. I think what the report asks us to do is to set out which alternative options we've considered and those which we've discounted. The reason we've discounted that option is because we've been advised by the Strategic Migration Partnership, and we feel as officers on behalf of you as members and on behalf of residents that we should be engaging with Serco. Otherwise, we'll have no control over where properties are procured, and we'd rather be in a position to have some level of influence over it rather than none at all.
Okay, thank you. Question 2. So page 5.5.2. So legal and governance implications are set out within this report. There are no legal restrictions in place that would prevent Serco from procuring private rented property in Worcester City. Neither are Serco legally obliged to consult with local councils if they intend to procure in area. Why not? Why don't they have to consult with us?
I don't have a legal answer for that, Chair. I think, again, we're taking advice from the Strategic Migration Partnership on this one. And it would be like many other types of housing provider that come into the city and procure property. I'm thinking about supported housing, a lot of the stuff related to the County Council. We find types of property spotting up in Worcester or all over the shop without any consultation undertaken. So it's the same principle.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'd like more information on that at some point later on, not tonight. That'd be really handy, but thank you for that answer. And on finishing straight now, if my computer stays on because the charge is running out. Last one, 3.1 on page 4. Quote, it would seem sensible for the council to continue engaging with Serco by way of a so-called hot mapping exercise, which is horrific use of English. I guess it's Serco's and not the council's. So bullet points are, Serco's earned a fortune for its part in the failed test and trace system, which cost taxpayers 37 billion quid. It's paid millions of pounds in fines for poor performance. The government privatised a huge part of the probation service despite many warnings. I think 2014, Chris Grayling, I might be wrong. Serco was awarded a huge probation service contract. The privatisation of the probation service was such a success that it was renationalised by a Tory government. Serco's CEO, Rupert Soames, has said he wants to, and I quote, cement the position of the private sector in the NHS. So to return to the point 4.2 on page 4, the option of not continuing to engage with Serco has been discounted. I would argue that Serco's track record should have meant that the option of working with it should have meant that it was discounted a long time ago, and therefore I urge members of this committee to oppose the recommendations within this report. There endeth the speech.
Just let me get that clear then, Councillor Lawrence. You're saying not to engage with Serco and have no control over the process at all?
I apologise for the lack of clarity in my impassioned bullet points. I've clearly got an emotional response to this particular company, given my previous professional background. I absolutely urge you to oppose points, the recommendations within this report, and that's not purely from the heart, that's based on research about this particular company. I'm sorry that the thrust of my argument was not clear in my impassioned bullet points. Reject the recommendations, please.
Yes, go on.
Lloyd, you mentioned a couple of times that Migration Partnerships suggests to engage with Serco. There's no problem with that, and I don't think we have an issue with talking to Serco. It's not. I would never cross out or discount anybody or any organisation. I think the point is they have never given up on their preferred option. They never said back to the Home Office. They never said it to me when I checked with them. I think they still prefer the fair share of support given to those people seeking asylum and safe haven to be spread out across the local authorities. So let's just point of clarity there. The Migration Partnership is not suggesting to this council to accept Serco's offer. That's not the case, is it?
The Strategic Migration Partnership have asked each individual council to come back to them with their preference of model.
Okay, I mean, I think from the report, we're not debating whether we're dealing with Serco or not. I think in terms of what they're saying is it's going to happen regardless of whether we engage or not, and we'd rather engage with them in terms of having some element and degree of say over what happens here. And from what you're suggesting, Councillor Lawrenson, is that we relinquish that opportunity.
Thank you for the opportunity to respond again. But as a layman, as a councillor, whatever, we're completely being led by this massive organisation. Why not use the opportunity tonight to say no? And there are plenty of people out there who would not want to engage with Serco, and I think this is a great opportunity to say no.
And how would that help the City of Worcester?
Well, what we do as a council, one would think, is to look at other potential options rather than just being led down a particular path saying you will work with Serco or nothing. I would like to think there's enough intelligence and passion within this council to explore alternatives rather than just go with Serco because that's what we're being told to do.
Chair, just to clarify, really, there is no other horse in town. I think is the best way I can put it. Serco are the appointed Home Office contractor for this region. The Home Office have contracted Serco to undertake this programme in the West Midlands region. So there is no other organisation that we can communicate with or engage with. It's either Serco or it's nothing at all.
With Serco, it's about telling them what Migration Partnership is advising is a better option to what their shareholders are advising them. That's the point.
Do we have any other speakers? Councillor Lamb?
Yeah, just for my own clarification. So we're saying that if we don't agree to this, Serco will just come in and purchase or rent out properties under our nose in Worcester But if we do agree to this, and the argument is that gives us some kind of engagement, what power do we actually have? What is the nature of this? If will Serco literally say to us, right, we're going to get this property, this property, this property, this property, and we will then say, well, no, we don't think that's a good idea. Will we actually have any say, or is this just a little bit of a smokescreen to say we're consulted? You know, we deal with consultation all the time in the council, and some of it's meaningful and some of it's completely meaningless, isn't it, to be honest with you? And I agree to a certain extent. Yeah, Serco is a company that I know a number of people on the left of politics and some people on the right of politics feel very, very uncomfortable with dealing with. And if we are going to sort of quite sup with the devil, that's really a bit too strongly, how much kind of leverage will we genuinely have on this if we do agree to it?
So I think in the letter I referred to earlier, Councillor Lamb, where the Home Office wrote to local authorities, one of their commitments, the second commitment there was to engage with local authorities around what that model looks like. So I think that's the government's commitment to doing that. I think to answer your question straightforwardly, there is no obligation. So I think we can provide our view, we can provide our sort of local intelligence, but I don't think there's any obligation upon Serco to listen to us. But again, I think the Strategic Migration Partnership have got vast experience in this, and you know, they've advised us to do this. So they must have seen this play out in other areas, and the fact that they're willing to meet with us and willing for us to have a conversation gives us a chance to influence that. But to answer your question directly, I don't think there's any legal obligation for Serco to have to listen to our advice or to listen to our local intelligence.
Councillor Hodgson.
This scheme is different to other schemes in the past. And this scheme is for asylum seekers full dispersal scheme. And yes, I'm not particularly happy that it's Serco who are who are the company who are sort of controlling this. But surely we've got to be in control as well. You are saying that the police, health and everything else are also coming to the table. So, and at least by giving the local knowledge, particularly the police, because the police have got intelligence in the fact that actually perhaps a house isn't suitable because of something, but actually maybe a house down here is better. And at least if we are round the table, we will at least have got some control. Whereas I think Lloyd is saying if we don't, then they will just come in and just accept sort of any houses. So I think I believe that we've got to have this way.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hodgson. I'll take this, Councillor Mackay and Councillor Cleary.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think as much as anything, there's a time issue involved here as well. The whole idea is to get people into better housing under better conditions that they're living at present. And if we don't move soon, the longer it takes, the worse it is for them. I think really it is summed up at para 4.2 that it will be important that local knowledge and intelligence provided by the council forms part of this process. If we don't engage, we can't do any of that. And that's the important thing that I think we should remember and move on with this as quickly as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary.
Thanks, Chair. I've got to be honest, I've got a lot of sympathy with what Councillor Lawrence and Councillor Petrosky have said about Serco, but that argument is done. That's an argument for 12 months ago. The contract is there. This is the best option, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, just to kind of just put everything in context, I mean, that decision has been made. I completely understand in terms of the ethics of Serco, but first and foremost, I think we have to put the priority of the safety and health and safety of the asylum seekers that we're talking about here. And if we're not around that table and we don't have that input, then we can't cater to some of those needs to understand where best to place those asylum seekers for their own health and safety and their benefit. And that's where the local knowledge from the police and from councillors and from officers can help there. So I mean, a completely standoffish approach leaves us vulnerable and open. In regards to your earlier point in terms of being compassionate, we are a compassionate city, we're a benevolent city, we've known for that, but we haven't got experience in taking, this is the first time we've actually encountered this scenario. So I would always advise us to take a smaller number, to learn, to understand, to accommodate, so we can do this properly. No doubt this won't be the only opportunity. There'll be further opportunities down the line that national government will impose upon us for us to take more. So it's always best in scenarios like that where we haven't demonstrated an ability to accommodate, to take the sensible and the precautious route of taking small numbers so we can make sure that we get it right first time. So we'll go to, if there aren't any more speakers, then we'll take the recommendations we'll do them by point, if that's okay. Yeah, one at a time. So recommendation 1.1, all those in favour? Okay, any abstentions? Any against? One against. Does that get you the numbers or not? Yeah, we've got to turn around to them. Okay, so that's carried. 1.2, all those in favour? Seven. Okay, any abstentions? One. And any against? Two against. Okay. 1.3. All those in favour? Okay. Any abstentions? One abstention. And any against? Two. Okay, and 1.4. All those in favour? Okay, any abstentions? One. And any against? Two against. So those are all carried then, yeah? Thank you. Thank you for your time on that one, Lloyd. Appreciate it. Okay, and we have agenda item 12, Q2 performance report.
Yeah,
Thank you, Chair. This is the quarter 2 performance scorecard, so members will be used to the format. On the left-hand side of the appendix is are the projects and actions that are overseen by this committee. On the right-hand side are the key performance indicators. In respect to the projects, there are 2 that have been completed and a number that are on track, and some that are slightly behind but are making progress. So we'd be happy to take any questions on those. And then in respect to the performance indicators, there are some red indicators, Chair. There are a number there relating to housing, and I think that's basically linked to our need to try and find more temporary accommodation, but Tom will be happy to take any questions on that one. The red KPI in respect of number of sport and play activity participants, I think from the narrative this relates to the hot summer months, where we weren't able to provide as many opportunities as we would like. So nothing untoward there, more related to weather, but happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Lloyd. Can I open it up to the floor, please? Councillor Cleary.
Thanks, Chair. It's just one question. It's regarding on page 117, total page 117, the percentage of HMOs licensed. We've got 66% are licensed and a target of 75. I go back to what I said about the EPCs. Everybody knows about EPCs. Everybody knows about energy efficiency. Everybody involved in letting a house knows they're supposed to license HMOs. I don't think 66 is anywhere near where it should be. So I'd like to ask, what are we doing to get that up? And secondly, shouldn't the target be a bit higher than 75%?
Tom.
Yeah, I mean, the figure, it looks very static, but it probably doesn't give the true picture of the work that's been undertaken. We've had the additional HMO licensings. There's been spikes in new license applications as well as renewals now. So the renewals are starting to come through. So the number is fluctuating, and the number that we're undertaking in license inspections and are increasing. So until we get on top of the total backlog, it will probably continue to look in a fairly static way. But it's the number that are coming in and the number that are going out are sort of balancing each other out. I take on board your point of the aspiration of increasing that provision. Certainly getting it back to our target of 75%. It hasn't been at that level for some time now. So I think there's some work that needs to be done to specifically focus on that. It's part of our private sector housing team. It is a priority for us, and we have had a work plan to try and address that and to pick up the shortfall. Moving forward, although there has been some work done around the meat enforcement, the new officer coming on board to pick up that area of work, that will free up that extra little bit of capacity to address the HMO licensing and other property standards work. Also the private sector housing team have been doing a number of additional property inspections for the Home to Ukraine scheme. So that's diverted some of their resource and capacity away, and that's sort of tailing off quite significantly now. So I would anticipate that in the next quarter it will certainly be looking a lot healthier.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on this item? Okay, if there isn't, then we'll can we agree to note the recommendation and the Q2 performance report in 1.1? All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Fine. There haven't been any other, item 13, any other business, there hasn't been anything notified. So appreciate your time and thank you, and have a safe journey home. Thank you.